Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Maple Creek, Colorado was a town where neighbors still waved to each other on their morning walks, and the smell of pine was always in the air, wafting from the surrounding mountains. On this warm Saturday morning, Chris Danvers felt the peaceful routine of his life as he stood on the porch of his modest two-story home and sipped a cup of black coffee. At 42, Chris has built a quiet, measured life here. He was a technician for the local utility company and was known around town as the reliable guy you called when your power line needed repairs or your home generator went down. 10 years of marriage to his wife, Kelly, had established a comfortable rhythm for him, working hard during the week, enjoying simple pleasures on the weekends. He took another sip and looked down the driveway. Kelly's car was missing. That same morning, she went to town on business. Normally, he might agree or take the time to tinker around in the garage, but today Chris had other things on his mind. A rare free weekend without emergency calls became an opportunity to relax a little. He wanted to download a new strategy video game that a colleague recommended. It had been a long time since he indulged in his old gaming hobby. Chris walked back into the house, closing the screen door behind him. The living room was quiet, sunlight streaming through the sheer curtains. The faint scent of Kelly's perfume still hung in the air from when she kissed him on the cheek before leaving, telling him she could stop by the 3rd Street Farmers Market. Everything seemed normal. Her voice was cheerful. Everything was fine that morning. He walked down the hallway into the small office that doubled as their home office. On the table sat a sleek silver laptop, Kelly's work computer. His own desktop computer had been crashing for weeks, and he never got around to fixing it, considering how busy the job was. Kelly offered him her laptop whenever he needed it. Her job as a sales manager often took her to travel, but when she was home, she didn't mind him using her for casual browsing or checking email. Sitting in his chair, Chris opened his laptop. The car hummed quietly, coming to life. He went to the online store to buy the game and started downloading. He drummed his fingers on the table as he waited, idly looking at the framed photographs on the wall. One was for their 5th anniversary, with him and Kelly smiling hand in hand on the beach in California. Another candid shot that Joe, his best friend since high school, took at a barbecue, with Chris in an apron and chef's hat flipping burgers while Kelly laughs next to him. It was 2 summers ago, he recalls. They looked happy. Were we really that happy? He found himself thinking for a moment. Recently, Kelly has been so busy with business trips that the time spent together has been reduced. But whenever she was home, everything was fine between them, if a little routine. The ringing of his laptop brought his attention back. Pop-up message. Storage is almost full. Please free some space to continue downloading. The game was large, and it looked like the laptop's hard drive was almost full. Frowning, Chris opened File Explorer to see what was taking up so much space. He sorted the drive by size and saw several large video files in an unfamiliar folder. It was hidden in a directory innocuously titled Work_Travel among spreadsheets and presentations. Perhaps Kelly had some training or presentation videos from her sales conferences littering the way. He hesitated. Kelly's work files were her own, and he usually respected that. But these video files were huge, tens of gigabytes each. Perhaps these were old notes that she no longer needed. Removing the pair would free up a lot of space for him to play. Chris reasoned that deleting the extra work video wouldn't do any harm, especially if it was stored somewhere else. He clicked on the folder. Inside, the files had simple names like Dallas_trip, MP4, and Chicago Seminar Mauve. Dallas and Chicago, he remembered these cities. Kelly went there for work conferences earlier in the year. It's strange that she saved large video files of them on her laptop. Perhaps recordings of seminars or meetings with clients. Now that he was curious, Chris double-clicked a file called Dallas_trip, MP4. The media player opened and the screen went dark for a moment as the video loaded. He expected to see a crowded conference room or a grainy recording of a speaker at the podium. Instead, when the first shot appeared, Chris saw a dimly lit hotel room. The camera shook a little, as if it had been placed on a table or was being held in someone's hand. There was a woman in the frame with her back to the camera. She seemed to be adjusting the angle. The next moment she stepped back, and Chris's heart almost stopped. It was Kelly. It was impossible to make a mistake about it. She was wearing a silky red blouse that he didn't recognize and a black skirt. This was not a work presentation. Chris felt a sudden chill despite the warm morning. He sat completely still, his eyes glued to the screen, a growing fear swirling in his gut. In the video, Kelly looked over her shoulder as if to see if anyone was watching, then walked out of frame. A second later, another figure appeared, a man, tall, with dark hair, without a shirt. The man walked up to the camera and his face briefly came into view as he adjusted something. Chris's chest tightened. He had never seen this man before. Before he was fully aware of what he was looking at, the man stepped back and Kelly came back into view as well, moving into his arms. They kissed passionately, with familiarity and greed, making it obvious that this was not their first embrace. Chris's hands on the keyboard became sticky. He couldn't breathe. What is this? This can't be. His mind was racing. Part of him wanted to slam the laptop shut and pretend he didn't see anything. But he was stunned, frozen in place as the video continued to play, confirming his worst fears in a matter of seconds. Kelly's laugh, a sound he knew so well, came through the laptop speakers, but there was something sultry about it that he'd never heard from her before. She whispered something to the man, but the camera microphone did not pick up. Then she took his hand and led him out of the frame to what looked like a hotel bed. Chris's throat was dry. His finger trembled over the pause button. He knew exactly where this video was leading, but a morbid, destructive curiosity kept him from stopping. It was as if confirming the truth, no matter how painful, was like quickly ripping off a bandage to reveal the wound underneath. He forced himself to watch for a few more seconds. The couple on screen moved onto the bed. When he saw the man's hands grab Kelly's blouse and begin to pull it over her head as she arched toward him, Chris finally snapped out of his trance. He pressed the spacebar to pause, unable to bear much more. The room was suddenly silent, except for the sound of his own heartbeat in Chris's ears. He realized he was holding his breath and let it out with a shudder. The frozen image on the screen showed his wife, scantily clad, with her eyes closed, clearly ecstatic in the arms of this stranger. Chris pushed away from the table, almost knocking over his chair. He stood with his hands behind his head, as if trying to physically keep his world from falling apart. A cold wave of nausea washed over him. This was not just flirtatious conversation or a one-time indiscretion caught by chance. It was a full-scale event captured on video. He blinked hard, hoping that he could wake up from this nightmare, that he could still be a man enjoying a quiet Saturday and looking forward to trying out a new game. Instead, he was a man whose life had just taken a cruel, unknown turn. For several seconds that seemed like an eternity, Chris simply stood in the office, looking at the frozen image on the laptop. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles turning white. He was overcome by a mixture of emotions: shock, anger, enormous pain, as if a knife had pierced his chest, and almost incredible confusion. How could this be real? Down the street, he heard the faint whir of a lawnmower as the Henderson boy mowed his parents' lawn, as he did every Saturday. A completely ordinary sound was completely out of place in the chaos that erupted in Chris's mind. The world outside remained unchanged, still pleasant and routine, while his personal world was falling apart. He walked away from the table, his legs giving way. A thought pierced through the haze. Kelly could return home at any moment. What if she walked in right now and saw what he discovered? Chris's heart was pounding. He reached out with a shaking hand and closed the video player window. The laptop screen returned to the file folder, the list of video files still displayed like a row of time bombs. He also quickly closed the folder, as if he could no longer stand the sight of those file names. He slammed his laptop shut and pressed his palms to his eyes. He needed to think. Or maybe he just needed to breathe. His chest felt tight. In the distance, he thought he heard a car door close. Was Kelly back yet? Panic grew. No, it was too early. She said she would be gone for a while. Probably a neighbor or someone across the street. And yet Chris realized that he could not stay in this room. Not with the evidence of her betrayal right there on his hard drive, etched in his memory even with the screen off. He had to leave the house to clear his head for a moment. On autopilot, Chris grabbed his keys and phone from the kitchen counter. Not even bothering to lock the front door, he walked outside into the bright morning light. His coffee mug sat abandoned on the porch railing, the coffee inside already cooling. As the door slammed behind him, Chris Danvers stood on the Maple Creek porch step, feeling the first tremors of the earthquake that would split his life in two. There was life as he knew it before this video, and now there was everything that would come after. For a long time, he just stared at the quiet, tree-lined street, trying to calm his breathing, trying to make sense of the meaningless. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. Chris walked aimlessly, his feet carrying him along a quiet suburban street. The morning sun was rising, warming the pavement beneath his sneakers, but he felt cold inside. His mind was a storm of fragmented thoughts and images, a still of the video of Kelly in the hotel room, the unknown man's hands on her, the sound of her laughter that now seemed like a cruel echo. How could this be the same woman who kissed him goodbye this morning? The breakup was surreal and abrupt. On the corner, Mrs. Gilbert, an elderly neighbor, was tending her rose bushes. She looked up and gave Chris a friendly wave, which he automatically returned with a tight smile. Just last week, he helped her plug in the lamp in the living room. Now, as he walked by, he hoped she wouldn't engage him in conversation, his voice caught in his throat. Luckily, she simply adjusted her sun hat and went back to trimming. Chris realized that he was still wearing slippers and had not had time to put on suitable shoes in his haste to escape from the house. It didn't matter. In any case, nothing was normal this morning. He reached a small park at the end of the block, a triangular patch of grass with a bench and a lone elm tree, overlooking a gentle slope that sloped down to the creek that ran behind the neighborhood. Behind the trees, a stream bearing the same name as Maple Creek gurgled quietly. Chris sat down on the bench. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and covered his face with his hands. It was only when no one was looking that he let out the shaky breath he'd been holding. His chest heaved, and, to his surprise, he began to sob. One hand instinctively covered his mouth, as if trying to drown out any sound on this painfully quiet morning. He couldn't remember the last time he cried. Maybe when his father died 5 years ago, even then he tried to remain calm for the sake of his mother. But now, out of sight under the shade of the elm tree, Chris Danvers was crying like a man who had been stabbed where it hurt most and had to hide the wound. Tears blurred his vision as he looked at the grass between his feet. He went over the past few months in his mind, trying to find signs he might have missed. Was Kelly distant? She traveled more often, but always attributed this to the demands of her new sales territory. When she returned home from these trips, she was often tired, sometimes a little quiet, but usually recovered after a day of rest. Chris attributed this to normal work stress. He never imagined this. A painful thought surfaced. Did he bring her to this? He tried to be a good husband, always supported her career, and never complained about her travels. Of course, their intimacy had cooled a little over the past couple of years, just the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage, he thought. They were both often tired from work. Some evenings they were still cuddling on the couch, still exchanging quick kisses on the way out the door. It wasn't a fiery passion, but it was comfortable. Or so he thought. Now he wondered if that comfort felt like a slight to her. Or was she just bored? He winced, remembering an offhand comment Kelly had made a year ago after visiting a friend in New York. Sometimes I wonder what life would be like if I hadn't settled down so soon. As she said this, she laughed, squeezed his hand, and added, "Just kidding, baby." Then he grinned too, not taking it seriously. Now it popped into his mind like a red flag that he had foolishly ignored. Chris clenched his jaw. As painful as it was to ask himself questions, another emotion rose within him, hotter and stronger. Anger. How dared to do this happening to their lives? They made vows. They were supposed to be a team, facing the world together. If she was unhappy, she could talk to him. They could work on something, go to counseling, whatever. But betrayal starting an affair under the guise of business trips was a betrayal of the deepest kind. This was not a mistake, it was a series of choices, deliberate and cruel in their deception. He wiped his face with his hands, wiping away the tears that had spilled. The pain in his chest was still there, but now it burned along with his simmering anger. It would be so easy to go home, call Kelly, and confront her as soon as she walked through the door. He imagined the shock on her face, the stuttered excuses or lies she might spew. Will she deny it, even with the evidence right there on her laptop? Will she cry and ask for forgiveness? The very thought of hearing her voice speak sorry, as if that could fix what she had broken, made his stomach turn. For a moment, Chris allowed himself to play out the scenario in his mind. His screams, her cries, accusations flying like shards of glass into their living room. Maybe she will try to blame him, or maybe she will confess everything. He felt his pulse quicken at the imagined confrontation, adrenaline mixing with pain and rage. It would be a scene of raw, ugly emotion. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm down. As good as it would be to unleash his pain on her, he knew that immediate confrontation carried risks. If he bursts into anger, he may say or do something he later regrets. And then what? A shouting match followed by a messy, impulsive decision. He had heard enough from a friend who experienced an unpleasant breakup. Rash actions can complicate everything, from the division of property to personal reputation. No matter how much he wants to demand answers right now, another part of him, the rational part, called for caution. He needed time to think clearly and decide what he really wanted to do. The marriage as he knew it was over, that much was certain. The trust was broken, and he doubted he could ever mend it again, even if he wanted to. If he had learned anything in life, it was that actions taken in the heat of the moment often resulted in regret. He straightened up and took a deep breath of the cool air by the stream. The smell of damp earth and pine resin calmed him a little. Kelly's betrayal was a devastating blow, but he was still standing. Yes, he was wounded in a place that might never fully heal, but he was not destroyed. He will not allow himself to be destroyed. After a few minutes, Chris's breathing evened out. The tears stopped, leaving him with an empty feeling and a constant headache in his eyes. He knew he needed support, someone he could talk to, even if it was just to say the terrible words out loud. Kelly cheated on me. I couldn't bear this alone, not today. His thoughts immediately turned to Joe. Joe Miller had been his closest friend since they were awkward 15-year-old schoolboys who got into harmless trouble and played on the same football team. Joe was the kind of friend who would drop everything if Chris was in trouble, just like Chris would have done to him. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His hand shook slightly as he approached Joe's contact. Pressing the call button, he realized that it was still early, barely after 9 in the morning. Joe liked to sleep in on the weekends, especially since he worked late at the fire station. But it couldn't wait. The phone rang. 1-2. Chris found himself pacing the bench with one hand on his hip. On the fourth ring, a hoarse, sleepy voice answered, "Low?" "Joe, it's me," Chris said, trying but failing to keep his voice level. "Chris?" Joe sounded a little more cheerful at the concern in his friend's tone. "Hey, what's wrong? Are you okay, dude?" Chris swallowed hard. He opened his mouth, but for a moment no words came out. He closed his eyes, and the image of Kelly and this man flashed behind his eyelids like a cruel slideshow. A surge of pain gave him the courage to speak. "No, I'm not okay, Joe." This is Kelly," Chris managed, his voice breaking at her name. Just saying it now felt like poison on his tongue. "I found something. On her laptop. She was..." He couldn't finish the sentence. His throat tightened. Joe was silent for half a second, but Chris could sense the change in his friend's behavior even over the phone. "Where are you now?" Joe asked in a calm but firm tone. I'm in a small park near my house, Chris said quietly. He ran his hand through his hair, tangling his fingers in it. I had to leave. I... I didn't want to be there when she came back. Stay here, Joe said immediately. I'll come. 10 minutes. You don't have to. Chris began to protest, but Joe had already hung up, his answer clear. Chris put the phone down and looked at it for a moment. He didn't even go into detail, but Joe understood enough. Looking at the ripples in the water of the stream reflecting the sunlight, Chris tried to drown out the pain until his friend arrived. He focused on mundane details, the distant chirping of a cricket, the crunch of gravel as a runner passed by on a path across a stream, the pattern of sunlight dancing on the ground. But inevitably his thoughts wandered back. A few minutes later, Joe's blue pickup truck pulled up to the curb outside the park. True to his word, he got dressed and drove straight here. He barely had time to close the truck door before he was heading across the grass towards Chris. Joe Miller was a large man, 43 years old, with a close-cropped beard and a perpetual baseball cap on his head. This morning, the cap was emblazoned with the logo of the Maple Creek Fire Department, where he worked as an EMT. As he approached, his face wrinkled with worry. Chris stood up from the bench when he saw his friend. Neither man said a word for some time. Joe then opened his arms and hugged Chris roughly. It was brief, not much was said in the wordless exchange between them. When they parted, Joe peered into Chris's face. "Tell me," Joe said simply in a low and even voice. Chris realized his eyes were red and bloodshot and quickly looked away, embarrassed by the tears. He pointed to the bench. They both sat down next to each other under an elm tree. For a moment, Chris had trouble getting started. He looked at the stream. "I found out that Kelly cheated on me," he finally said in a dull voice. Saying those words out loud was like swallowing broken glass. Joe's arms reached down and grabbed his knees. He inhaled sharply but remained silent, allowing Chris to continue at his own pace. Chris confusedly recounted the events. He decided to download the game, came across the video files, and what he saw in those few terrible moments. His voice shook, especially when he described Kelly and the other man together. He spared Joe the most explicit details, but the point was clear enough. "She wrote it down, Joe," Chris said, shaking his head in disbelief and wiping a tear from his cheek. "God knows why, but she did it. There are several videos from different trips. Dallas, Chicago. Who knows how long this has been going on, and I was completely blind to it." At this, Joe cursed under his breath and stared into the distance, clenching his jaw. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. I don't even know what to say, dude." He turned back to Chris, his eyes blazing with protective anger. "I'm so sorry, Chris. You don't deserve this. Not one bit." Chris managed to nod weakly. Joe's words did bring some comfort. At least someone acknowledged the injustice done to him. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the revelation subsiding. Finally, Joe spoke in a serious and controlled tone, as if holding himself back from exploding. "So, what are you going to do?" Chris kept asking himself this question. He ran his hand over the stubble of his chin. "I don't know yet," he admitted quietly. "Part of me wants to go home and wait for her, confront her as soon as she comes in." His eyes narrowed as he imagined it. Ask her why, ask her how long, yell at her. Throw those damn videos in her face. Joe nodded slowly. "She has to answer for this. She can't just get away with this." "No, she can't," Chris agreed with a sharp edge in his voice. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress another wave of anger. "But I keep thinking, if I run into her now, when I'm so angry, hurt, it will be a disaster. I could completely lose control." Joe was silent for a moment. "I get it. You want to keep your cool. But man, I can't imagine you staying under the same roof with her after this." "I'm not going to do that, at least not for a while," Chris said. He realized it was true. He already felt that he had stepped out of the door of this house with one foot. The house now seemed ruined. "But I have to be smart. I need to figure out the next steps both legally and practically." You mean divorce, Joe said bluntly, glancing at Chris to gauge his reaction. The word sat heavily between them. Divorce. 10 years of marriage collapsed in one morning. Chris's stomach turned, but he nodded. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any other way. I can't. I can't forgive this, Joe. I just can't. His voice broke softly. Joe put a hand on his shoulder, supporting him. If I were you, I'd say the same thing. She didn't just make a mistake once and admit it. She did it over and over again and probably would have continued if you hadn't found out. It's not a mistake, it's a betrayal. Chris looked at his friend, grateful for the confirmation. It's betrayal, the worst kind. So yeah, I think divorce is where this is going. Joe took off his cap, ran his hand through his gray hair, and put the cap back on. He exhaled. Okay, then we need a plan. The last thing you want is for her to somehow turn this against you or set you up in the process. Chris frowned. What do you mean? I mean financially, legally, everything, Joe said, his tone hardening at the thought. I've seen guys get scammed and end up losing their home and paying child support and all that stuff because they misbehaved or they let the scammer take the narrative. He almost spat out the words. Chris hasn't even begun to think about the practical consequences. Their house, their bank accounts, their savings, all of it will have to be sorted out. I don't care about money or home right now, he muttered, although he knew that wasn't entirely true. I just want to leave. Of course I understand, but you should take at least enough care to make sure she doesn't take more than she should. Joe leaned forward, resting his elbows on his hips, and spoke seriously. Look, I know it sounds cold to talk about money at a time like this, but divorces can get nasty. You need to protect yourself. She sure as hell wasn't looking out for you when she decided to spend the night. That last bit came with a venom that surprised Chris. He looked at Joe. His friend's face turned red with anger. Joe himself went through a bad breakup in his 30s, not because of a marriage, but because of a long-term girlfriend who left him for someone else. Chris realized that Joe may have taken it too personally, passing on his past pain. But he was right. Chris needed to be smart. You're right, Chris admitted. I need to really think about this. I should probably get a lawyer, right? Definitely, Joe said decisively. Good divorce lawyer. Do you know anyone? Chris shook his head. He never had any reason to contact a family lawyer. Not really. Maybe I could find someone. Or, do you remember Mike from the hardware store? His brother got divorced last year. Maybe he knows someone. As he spoke, another name occurred to him. Actually, wait. I remember someone, Monica Decker. She's a lawyer in town who practices family law. We met her at a charity golf event last summer, remember? She gave us her business card after you told her that joke about the golfer and the gopher. A faint smile flashed across Joe's face at the memory. Really, Monica? She seemed sharp and tough. I still have her card somewhere at home in a drawer, Chris said, feeling a small spark of purpose now that he had a specific task in front of him. I'll contact her first thing on Monday. I may be able to schedule a consultation. Okay, Joe nodded. In the meantime, you should probably act as normally as possible around Kelly until you get your ducks in a row. The thought of being a loving husband for just one more day gave Chris chills. But he knew Joe was right. If he alerts Kelly by acting too strangely, she might try to cover her tracks or hide assets or God knows what. Yes, I thought about that too. Do you think you can do this? Joe asked softly, concerned in his eyes. It's asking a lot. I don't know if I can hold it in. Chris looked back at the stream. Can he pretend everything is fine? I have to, he said quietly. At least until I get everything in order. I can't just leave with nothing but the shirt on my back because I blew up without a plan. Joe patted him on the shoulder. You're stronger than me, dude, but I'll help as much as I can. If you need a place to sleep or hide things, come to me. No questions asked. Thanks, Joe. Maybe I can move some personal items into your garage discreetly. I don't want to alert her by obviously packing. Absolutely. We'll do it. Just tell me when. They talked a little more, clarifying the beginning of the plan. Joe suggested that Chris also collect any evidence of the case and keep it prints and copies of the video if he could bear it. Even if it doesn't matter to divorce law, it's leverage, Joe said with a grim expression, and insurance in case she tries to lie or make you out to be the bad guy. Chris agreed. As frustrating as these videos were to handle, he knew he had to save them somewhere she couldn't get to in case she deleted them from the laptop. It was evidence, if not for the trial, then at least for his own peace of mind, and perhaps for confronting her when the time came. After a while, Chris became overcome with quiet determination. The initial shock gave way to determination. Now a clear path had formed before him. Joe looked at his watch and sighed. I wish I could spend the whole day with you, but I have a shift at noon. Will you be okay? Chris nodded. Yes, I can handle it. I think thanks to you, I have a plan now. Joe frowned. All I did was listen and state the obvious. But any time, brother, seriously. They both stood up from the bench. Chris felt a reluctant dread at the thought of returning home, but he knew he'd have to do it before Kelly came back and wondered where he'd gone. He also needed to pick up Monica's business card and start gathering documents and evidence while Kelly wasn't around. Joe walked him back to the side of the road where his truck was idling. Before Chris turned and headed toward his house down the street, Joe gave him another quick hug. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything. Want to blow off some steam at 2 a.m. Need help carrying things? Just call. I'll do it, Chris said in a grateful voice. Thanks, Joe, really. Joe nodded, then his expression darkened slightly. And Chris, one more thing. To him, Joe's gaze hardened. Don't believe any bullshit she might spew when you finally confront her. I know your heart is as big as this entire town, but don't let her take advantage of it. She made her choice. Don't let her tears or excuses get to you when the time comes. Chris digested this and then slowly responded, I won't let her off the hook. Not after what she did. Satisfied, Joe patted his hand and then climbed into his truck. Hang in there. You'll get through this, and you'll get better, trust me. The walk home seemed strangely long, each step heavy with the knowledge of what he would have to face inside this house. When Chris reached his yard, he stopped. Kelly's car was still not in the driveway. Good. He had time. It's time to gather your strength and start putting your plan into action. He entered the house and closed the door behind him, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet hall. The house seemed different now. The warmth and love it once held was overshadowed by what he discovered, but he couldn't afford to stop there. Not now. First of all, evidence. He went straight into the office and opened Kelly's laptop again. The screen came to life. For a second, he was afraid that the video file was still open. His hands were steadier now as he returned to the work_travel folder. The files were still there, harmless in name, but catastrophic in content. Dallas_trip, MP4, Chicago Seminar Mauve, and 2 others named Denver Client, MP4, and Seattle_trip, MP4. There are 4 videos in total. 4 betrayals are recorded for posterity. Chris swallowed the bile rising in his throat and pulled out a flash drive from his desk drawer. It was a 64 GB flash drive that he had used to transfer some work files a few months ago. There was more than enough space for them. He plugged it into the laptop's USB port and started copying video files to it. A progress bar appears. This will take a few minutes. While the files were being copied, Chris opened another desk drawer and rummaged through its contents. In this box, they kept various office supplies, bills, and business cards. He hurriedly fingered it. Paper clips, calculator, unopened mail. Finally, his fingers found what he was looking for, a crisp white business card with raised black letters. Monica Decker, attorney, family law and mediation. Her office address was in downtown Maple Creek. He remembered her handshake firm and confident when they met at a charity event. He remembered joking with her about hoping to never need her services. Ironic. He carefully placed the card on the table. He'll call her first thing on Monday morning. Perhaps he could even send an email this weekend to set up a meeting. The file transfer beeped, indicating completion. Chris pulled out the flash drive and put it in his pocket. He considered deleting the files from the laptop so Kelly wouldn't see them being accessed. But if he removed them, she might notice they were gone and panic. It's better to leave them as is untouched, so that she remains in the dark. However, he cleared the recent files list in the media player and system in case something there indicated that he had opened a video from Dallas. Now, if Kelly had opened this laptop, there would have been no obvious traces of his surveillance. Next, he needed to secure important documents and information. In such a situation, knowledge was power. He went upstairs to the master bedroom. The room he had shared with Kelly for years now seemed almost foreign to him. The neatly made bed, the smell of her lotion in the air, the framed wedding photo on the dresser, all this resembled a set, an illusion of a happy life. Chris forced himself to concentrate. In the closet, on the top shelf, there was a fireproof metal box in which vital documents were stored: passports, marriage certificates, house deeds, bank account details. He pulled off the heavy box and carried it to the bed. His fingers hovered over him. The box had a combination lock, and this combination indicated the date of their wedding. He hesitated for a moment, the cruel irony not escaping him. Then he turned the numbers over, 0615, and opened the lid. There were folders neatly arranged inside. He flipped through and pulled out what he needed: copies of bank statements, investment account information, a deed. He didn't know exactly what the divorce process would require, but it was likely important for the division of assets. His and Kelly's most recent tax returns were also there. He took them. He found their marriage certificate. His gaze lingered on the ornate paper and signatures, both of them full of hope that day 10 years ago. A wave of sadness washed over him, but he pushed it aside and put the certificate down with the rest. There was also an old copy of the will they had made years ago, leaving everything to each other. He winced at the thought and left it in the box. He folded the selected documents and folders and carried them downstairs. He took his briefcase from the hallway closet and stuffed the papers inside. Just in case, he added a flash drive with a video and Monica's business card, stuffing them into a zippered compartment. This briefcase would follow him everywhere until the papers were safely with Monica or in a safe place that Kelly could not access. Next is finance. He and Kelly had a joint checking and savings account at Maple Creek Credit Union, as well as separate personal checking accounts where their paychecks were sent. Many of their bills were paid automatically through a joint check into which they each paid a monthly contribution. They also had a joint credit card. Chris realized he might have to split things up. He didn't think Kelly would drain their accounts, but then again, he didn't think Kelly would cheat. He sat down at the kitchen table with his laptop, his own, smaller and older one that he used for personal matters. Logging into online banking, he checked their balance. Their joint savings amounted to a significant amount, mostly an emergency fund, and some money they had put aside for a big vacation they planned to take someday. The joint check was enough for monthly expenses. Should he transfer some money? He could transfer half of his savings to his personal account. Perhaps it was his money too. But it could be alarming if Kelly checks the bank. It may be better to quietly withdraw some of the cash or open a new account at a different bank and move some of it. It's worth asking Monica about this later. For now, he decided to take a small step. He changed the passwords on his personal bank account and on general accounts. Kelly rarely logged in. He was usually busy with accounts, so she might not have noticed. He made sure that the password for his personal account was one that she would never guess. After finishing setting up a new password consisting of random letters and numbers, he heard the familiar sound of the garage door opening. Kelly's car. She's back. Chris's heart sank. He quickly closed his laptop and looked around to make sure nothing looked out of place. The drawer is from the closet. He left it on the bed upstairs, still open. Curse. He grabbed the briefcase from the table and hurried up the stairs, taking them two at a time. He heard the garage door close and the car engine turn off. She'll come any second. In the bedroom, he stuffed the documents and the flash drive deeper into his briefcase and put it under the bed far enough back that it was not immediately visible. He then slammed the drawer shut and placed it back on the closet shelf, turning the combination lock to mix up the numbers. As he closed the closet door, he heard the garage door creaking downstairs. "Chris, I'm home," Kelly's voice rang out. Chris closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he answered, trying to speak in a normal tone, "In the bedroom, dear." He took one last look around. The bedroom looked ordinary. His face in the mirror caught his attention. He looked pale and his eyes were still a little red. He rubbed his face and took a deep breath, forcing his heartbeat to slow down. "You can do this," he told himself. "Just act natural." He walked out into the hallway just as Kelly walked up the stairs. In her hands, she carried a couple of brown paper bags with groceries. Seeing him, she smiled. "That's it. I was going to ask my strong husband to help with the groceries." Chris's stomach flipped at the word husband, but he managed a small smirk. "Of course, let me help." He ran down the stairs towards her and took one of the bags. Up close, Kelly looked the same as she always did on a normal Saturday. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a light green blouse. She leaned over and gave him a quick peck on the lips, a routine gesture that now seemed completely wrong to Chris. He hoped she didn't notice how harshly he returned the letter. "Thank you," she said, handing over the heavy bag. "I have what we need for dinner tonight. I think I'll make spaghetti and meatballs your favorite." Chris's throat tightened. It was almost cruel how kind and normal she acted, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't broken his heart into pieces just a few hours ago. He forced himself to swallow and nodded. "Sounds great." They carried the food to the kitchen. Kelly began unloading vegetables and pasta from the bags. "The farmer's market was packed," she chartered cheerfully. "I met Jane at yoga class, and she said hi. Oh, and I have those heirloom tomatoes you like. They'd be perfect for the sauce." She acted so casual, so casual. Chris admired this distantly. How she knew how to lead a double life, to come to his house as if everything was fine after what she had done. His gaze involuntarily darted to her phone, which she placed on the counter. Did she have text messages from Lover? Has she already planned their next meeting on the upcoming business trip? "That's great," Chris managed to say, responding to her conversation about tomatoes. He placed the milk in the refrigerator and the bread on the counter, concentrating on each item so as not to look at her too much. He was sure that if he looked into her eyes now, he would either cry or burst into anger, which he could not afford. "How was your morning?" Kelly asked politely. "Sorry it took so long. I stayed to chat with Jane and lost track of time." "Everything was fine," he said, trying to speak as evenly as possible. For safety's sake, he clung to half-truths. "I played around on the computer for a bit. I tried to download that game I mentioned, but you didn't have enough space on your laptop." I didn't know it was that full," Kelly said, only half paying attention as she opened the cabinet to put away the spices. There was no hint of alarm or suspicion in her voice. "Yes, I made a mistake. I freed up space by deleting a couple of old videos." He lied smoothly, testing the waters. His heart was pounding as he said this, and he turned away, pretending to wipe the countertop. "Okay, as long as it wasn't something important," Kelly answered easily. "Work things?" "I think so. They looked like old conference tapes. They were huge files." He dared to look at her. She folded the now empty grocery bags to hide them. If what he said caused any alarm, she didn't show it. Kelly just shrugged. "I should probably put this laptop away anyway. It at work keeps asking me to back up and archive old files. Thanks for that." The ease with which she lied to him, or at least hid the truth, even in this minor conversation, was like a slap in the face. She really had no idea that he knew her secret. She might have casually thanked him for deleting the old conference notes, completely unaware that he was referring to the notes of her own affairs. He chuckled huskily, hoping it sounded natural. No problem. I didn't delete too much. Enough for my game. In fact, I'm still downloading it. He added the last part so that he would have an excuse if she accidentally checked the laptop and found files there. He could say that he didn't need to remove them in the end or anything like that. Cool. Well, have fun, she said, smiling. They continued with the routine tasks of cleaning up the food. Kelly talked a little more about the market stall and a recipe she'd like to try someday. Chris responded where necessary, using years of marital habit to make the correct noises and nods, but his mind was elsewhere. Inside, he felt like he was on autopilot, watching this ordinary domestic scene from afar. He couldn't reconcile the image of them two spouses in the kitchen, preparing for dinner with the reality of what lay behind them. It was like being in a play that he no longer believed in. As Kelly began to wash the lettuce for the salad, she glanced at him. Are you okay? You're pretty quiet, tired. For a split second, panic flared within him. Did she feel something? Is its facade already cracked? He forced himself to yawn. Yeah, a little tired. I didn't sleep well last night. It wasn't even a lie. He tossed and turned, worrying about a project at work. Now this trivial worry seemed laughable. Awa. She dried her hands with a towel and came closer, touching his shoulder with her hand. Maybe you can take a nap this afternoon. We don't have any plans until dinner, right? He almost recoiled from her touch, but managed to stay in place. Inviting him to take a nap, feigning concern, she still played the role of a caring wife flawlessly. Perhaps I will, he said quietly. Kelly squeezed his hand lightly and then returned to the vegetables. Good idea. I might join you. We could both use a little lazy time. Chris muttered something affirmative and then retreated, pretending to check his phone. The thought of lying next to her in bed right now and pretending that everything was fine was unbearable. But he may have to do this to continue this farce. Not for long, he reminded himself. If everything goes according to plan, this torment will not last long. He left the kitchen, saying that he was going to clean up the office where he was sitting at the computer. Once in the hallway, out of her sight, he allowed his face to contort in disgust and pain. In the office, he closed the door and leaned against it, closing his eyes. He took a few slow breaths. One interaction left and countless more to go before it's all over. But he did it. He looked into her face and didn't show it. It meant something. Chris went back to the laptop, checking again to make sure it was logged out of the bank. He had. Just in case, I cleared my browser history. Then he took Monica's business card and turned it over in his fingers thoughtfully. Email. He could have at least sent her an email right now, today, briefly stating that he needed her services so he wouldn't lose his cool on Monday. He glanced at the closed office door, then sat down and composed a short message. Dear Miss Decker, I hope you remember me. We met last year at a Rotary fundraiser. My name is Chris Danvers from Maple Creek. I am contacting you because I urgently need advice on a divorce issue. Can we make an appointment as soon as possible next week? I would really appreciate your help. Sincerely, Chris Danvers. He read it twice. There was a feeling of hardness, but it will do. At the end, he added his phone number and clicked Submit. After that, there was nothing left to do but get through the weekend as normally as possible. It was a cruel paradox he had to spend time in the company of the person who had caused him the most pain, acting like a devoted husband, while knowing that in a few days he would leave her. As he left the office, he heard Kelly humming a tune from the kitchen, as she often did while cooking. The sound pierced his chest. This was the woman he loved, or thought he loved, the same woman who looked into his eyes and lied for who knows how long. Sunday morning dawned gray and rainy, a rare cloudy day in Maple Creek. Chris shuddered on the living room couch. The night before he had planned to sleep in bed with Kelly, but after dinner he feigned an upset stomach and suggested he lie down on the sofa so as not to disturb her. She protested gently, but he insisted, and eventually she let it go and went to bed alone, kissing his forehead. In truth, the thought of crawling into the same bed, under the same blanket, where they had been so close, now gave him goosebumps. So he spent the night on the couch, getting only a few hours of fitful sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind replayed parts of the video and conjured up images of Kelly with another man. More than once he woke up with his heart pounding, anger and pain twisting his insides. Now the faint morning light was filtering through the curtains. It was early, a little after 6 in the morning, according to the wall clock. On a normal Sunday, he and Kelly might sleep in until about 8 and then have a lazy lunch or coffee together. Not today. Chris sat down, his back hurting from the awkward position. He rubbed his face and took a deep breath. Today, he needed to do something. Idleness only gave room for dark thoughts and the risk of eluding Kelly. The quiet patter of rain drummed on the windows. He looked out into the corridor. The bedroom door was still closed. Kelly will likely sleep a little longer, especially if the weather is unclear. This suited him. He quickly dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, then scribbled a note and left it on the kitchen counter. "Get breakfast with Joe. Be back later. S." It was partly true. He did plan to see Joe. He and Joe exchanged a few texts last night after Joe's shift ended around 10 p.m. Chris told him, still playing it cool. Meeting with a lawyer on Monday. Joe replied that he would be free in the morning if Chris needed anything. They agreed to meet for coffee at Maggie's Diner at 7 a.m. Chris quietly picked up his briefcase, which he had hidden under the bed the day before. There were all the documents and a flash drive, things he didn't want to leave unused. If Kelly gets nosy and finds them, it will ruin everything. Just in case, he decided to leave the briefcase with Joe for safekeeping. If Kelly had asked, he might have said that it contained some work files that he needed Joe's help with. Taking the car keys, Chris slipped out through the garage, carefully closing the door behind him. The morning air was cool and damp. He drove through quiet Sunday streets, windshield wipers rhythmically shaking off the rain. Despite the gloomy weather, he felt relieved to leave the house. Maggie's Diner was a 24-hour establishment frequented by firefighters and police officers at Joe's suggestion. When Chris arrived, he saw Joe's pickup truck already in the parking lot, with a drop of rain glistening on the hood. The inside of the diner smelled of coffee and frying bacon. At this hour, it was almost empty, just a couple of truckers at the counter and an elderly couple at the window. Joe waved from the booth in the back. There was a steaming mug in front of him, and he had already ordered a plate of pancakes, which he was collecting. He looked up as Chris slid into the seat opposite him. "Good morning," Joe greeted, looking him over. "You look terrible." "Thank you," Chris said wryly, clutching a waiting mug of coffee that Maggie herself had probably prepared for him. She knew the regulars. He took a sip. It was strong and hot, just what he needed. "I don't think couch surfing is for me." Joe furrowed his brow. "Did you sleep on the couch? Did she kick you out or something?" "No, nothing like that. I just couldn't. I didn't want to share a bed with her. Not after what I know, so I apologized." "Jesus," Joe muttered, shaking his head. "This is a complete mess." He pushed the plate of pancakes towards Chris, offering some. Chris wasn't hungry, but he took a small bite to appease Joe. They spoke in low voices, mindful of the other visitors. Chris briefly described how the rest of Saturday went. Normal behavior, small talk, the effort it took to keep up appearances. Joe listened, occasionally swearing under his breath at the humiliation of it all. "I copied all the videos and got the key documents," Chris said, nervously tapping his foot under the table. "Everyone is here." He patted the briefcase lying on his side. "Okay, if you want, we can lock it in my gun safe at home," Joe suggested. "There's no chance she'll ever see it." "Actually, that would be great, just until I need them." "Have you contacted a lawyer?" "I emailed her. I'm going to call her on Monday morning too. Hopefully I can meet her right away." Joe nodded approvingly. "Reliable. And if you need me to come as backup or anything when it's time to tell Kelly to go to hell, I'm there." Chris managed a weak smile. I appreciate it. I hope it doesn't turn violent or anything. I don't plan on letting that happen. I want it to be quick and calm if possible. Yeah, you were always calm and collected, Joe said, stirring his coffee. As for me, I'd be flipping tables and probably spending a night in jail if I were you. There were times when I felt close to it, Chris admitted quietly, looking at the dark liquid in his cup. But what will it do? Just more chaos. Exactly, and she's not worth getting into trouble for. They sat in silence for a while until the waitress Donna came over to pour them coffee. Joe gave her a quick smile and a thank you. Once she was out of earshot, Joe cleared his throat. You, think you'll also confront the guy she's seeing? He asked. Chris considered the question. I don't know. I don't even know who he is, really. I mean, I saw his face in the video. I think I heard her call him Nick, or maybe it was Rick in one clip. In truth, during the long, sleepless hours of the previous night, he had dared to watch snippets of other videos on a flash drive, alone in a dark living room, with headphones on so Kelly wouldn't hear. It was masochistic, but he felt he needed to know the depths. In one video taken at a hotel he recognized in Denver, she actually called the man Rick as he pinned her against the wall. The pain from this sight was excruciating. Joe raised an eyebrow. Rick, yes. Ring the bells. No, I don't think he's from here. It could be a guy from her company or a client. Honestly, I don't care who he is at this point. He didn't give me a vow, she did. That's on her. True. Joe's jaw clenched. Still, part of me wants to find that bastard and make sure he knows he got involved with the wrong man's wife. Chris appreciated the loyalty of Joe's statement, but shook his head. I feel the impulse, but what will that do? If anything, it might give Kelly an excuse to make me the bad guy. Oh, he went and beat up poor Rick. I'm not giving her any victim card to play. Joe chuckled. Fair enough. That's just my inner caveman talking. I won't actually do anything unless you ask. I know. Chris took another sip of coffee. This morning it was especially bitter. Anyway, Monica is a lawyer. She might have some advice on how to tell the other guy's spouse about this, if he has one. If it's even a cause for concern. Right now, I'm focused on getting free and minimizing the consequences. Right. Speaking of consequences, is there a chance she'll suspect anything? I don't think so. I was careful. She seems completely clueless as far as I'm concerned. She even thanked me for freeing up some space on the laptop, if you can believe it. Chris let out a humorless laugh. You're kidding me, Joe said, his eyes widening in disbelief. No. I basically told her that I deleted some conference videos because the drive was full. She didn't bat an eyelid. Chris sighed. She's so confident in her lies that she doesn't even feel like anything is wrong. Joe shook his head slowly. Unreal. Her nerves, man. There was a short silence. The rain intensified outside, pouring down the windows. The diner's neon sign reflected off the wet sidewalk. Joe finished his plate and pushed it aside. So what's on the agenda today other than meeting the lady lawyer tomorrow? Chris shrugged. I'll try to stay busy. I'll probably actually look for apartments or short-term rentals online. Monica will probably tell me not to move out until certain things are submitted or agreed upon, but I at least want options ready. I can't stay in this house any longer than necessary. You can stay with me anytime, you know that. Thanks, Joe. I'll keep that in mind if there's any gap between leaving and moving somewhere else. Joe tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. You can also think about who else you want to tell and when. Like mutual friends or her parents, maybe. If you get ahead, she won't be able to turn them against you. If she's as manipulative as she seems, she might try to say something like you're leaving her or something. The thought made Chris's stomach churn. He hadn't even considered the social aspect yet. They had a small circle of mutual friends in town, and Kelly's parents lived in another state but visited from time to time. I guess I'll have to tell people once it all starts. I'll probably just say we're getting a divorce due to irreconcilable differences, unless I need to clarify why. You're 100% cuter than me. I'd blow her infidelity off the rooftops, Joe said with a dark chuckle. Then he looked at Chris more tenderly. But do what you're comfortable with. Just remember, you didn't do anything wrong. Don't let her make you feel differently. I know, Chris replied, although deep down some small part of him still felt the sting of personal failure, this question about why wasn't it enough for me. He dismissed the thought. Step by step. Today, I survived. Tomorrow, lawyer. Joe picked up his coffee mug. Then step by step. Chris clinked his mug with Joe's in a hesitant toast and took a long sip. The road ahead was difficult, but at least he had someone walking it with him. After breakfast, they paid the bill and hit the road. The rain gave way to a light drizzle. Chris followed Joe back to his house a few blocks away. In Joe's garage, a cluttered space that smelled of motor oil and sawdust, Chris handed over the briefcase. "Are you sure you don't mind keeping this?" he asked. "Not at all. I'll put it in the gun safe, just like I said." Joe opened the heavy steel safe in the corner and stuffed the briefcase next to the rifle and several envelopes of cash. Once it was locked, he patted the top of the safe. Fort Knox. "Thank you," Chris said, feeling a little lighter knowing the items were safe. Before he left, Joe patted him on the shoulder. "Are you going to be okay for the rest of the day?" "Yeah, I think I'll just pretend I'm working on something in the garage or go run errands. Try to avoid spending too much time with that vixen. If anything comes up, call me, and let me know what the lawyer says." "Fine." They parted in a quick brotherly embrace. Chris drove home, rehearsing a random excuse to leave if Kelly asked. Perhaps Joe needed help fixing something at his house. Yes, that will do. As it turned out, when he returned, Kelly was still in her robe and drinking tea in the kitchen, her hair damp from the shower. "Hello," she said cheerfully. "You're back sooner than I thought. How's Joe?" "He's fine," Chris said, hanging up his jacket. "He was fixing the garage door and needed some extra help, so I helped him after breakfast." "Oh, that was nice of you." She yawned. "It's such a gloomy day. I think I'll just curl up with a book." "That sounds relaxing," he replied. He again noted her relaxed demeanor. Nothing seemed abnormal. He joined her at the kitchen table for a moment. She had a Sunday newspaper with a travel section in her hands. "Do you have plans for this week?" he asked lightly, checking to see if she had mentioned any travel. She looked up. "As for work, I have a meeting with a client in Denver on Wednesday, just a day trip. And, oh, I might have to fly to Seattle in a week, but that's not confirmed yet. Why?" He maintained a neutral expression while his insides churned. "Seattle. Certainly. One of the videos was called Seattle_trip. MP4. So that romantic date may still be going on." It took all his willpower not to clench his fists. "Just wondering. I was thinking maybe we could visit my mom next weekend if you were free. Haven't seen her in a while." It was a spur-of-the-moment lie that mentioned his mother, who lived a couple of hours away, but he wanted to see if she was trying to avoid spending time with him. Kelly nodded, seemingly unperturbed. "Of course, I'll be here next weekend. We could go on Saturday." "Yes," Chris said quietly. He had no real plan to make this trip now. It was just a test. And she readily agreed, which meant that if she was manipulating her affair, either she had nothing planned for this weekend, or she was confident that she could change her lie. Either way, it didn't tell him anything obvious. They spent the rest of Sunday in relative silence. Kelly was reading a book in the living room, while Chris cleaned out the garage under the guise of overdue work. The physical labor of sorting tools and sweeping helped channel his nervous energy. At dinner, they ate the leftovers and watched a nature documentary on TV. There were times when Chris could almost make himself feel normal, but then he'd catch sight of her out of the corner of his eye, her familiar profile, the way she was laughing quietly at something on the screen, and the wave of bitterness would hit him again. Night fell, and they went to bed. This time he did not have a convenient excuse to spend the night somewhere else. Kelly patted the space next to her invitingly. "I hope there won't be any stomach problems tonight," she teased lightly. He forced himself to laugh. "No, I'll be fine." Lying next to her, the mattress sagging under their combined weight, was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. He stayed to the side, feigning exhaustion. Kelly turned off the bedside lamp, and the room went dark. After a minute, he felt her move closer and hug him, gently pressing him to her. It took all my willpower not to flinch. Her touch, which had once been a source of comfort, now felt like a mark of betrayal. He remained motionless, breathing evenly, pretending to fall asleep. She finally sighed, kissed his shoulder, and rolled to her side of the bed to fall asleep. Chris stared into the darkness, clenching her jaw, and waited for long minutes until her breathing slowed and deepened, signaling that she was sleeping. Only then did he quietly slip out of bed. He retreated to the living room again, spending the rest of the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling and counting down the hours until Monday. He didn't sleep, but when the first rays of dawn penetrated the windows, he felt a grim determination. Today he will see Monica. Today will be the beginning of the end of this farce. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. By 8:30 a.m. Chris was sitting in the waiting room of Monica Decker's law office, a nondescript but well-kept suite on the second floor of a brick office building downtown. The rain from the weekend has subsided, leaving the air crisp and the sky pale blue. He didn't bother going to work that morning, but instead called his personal account. He was rarely able to take time off on short notice, but he had free time, and no one doubted it when he muttered something about family problems. He decided that the legal basis for his failing marriage was a valid reason. The administrator almost immediately led him inside. The waiting room was small, with 2 chairs and a potted plant, but he only sat there for a minute before Monica left her office. She looked just as he remembered her, about 45, a sharp gray suit and piercing brown eyes that gave the impression that she had not missed anything. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun. She extended her hand. "Chris Danvers, Monica Decker, please come in." Her voice was warm but professional. Chris stood up and shook her hand. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice," he said as he followed her into her office. "Of course, your letter seemed urgent." She closed the door behind him. The office was compact but organized. A large desk with neatly stacked files, law books on the shelves, a window overlooking the main street of Maple Creek. She motioned for him to sit in one of the 2 leather chairs in front of the table. As he sat down, Monica gave him a sympathetic look. "I have to admit, I was surprised to hear you say that, Chris. I remember you speaking very fondly of your wife the last time we met." She paused, as if searching for words. "You mentioned divorce in your message. What happened?" Chris felt a lump in his throat, but suppressed it. He decided to solve this problem here, as if nothing had happened. This was not a therapy session, it was a business. "I discovered that my wife Kelly was having an affair," he said bluntly. "Several times actually, at least in the last year, as far as I can tell." Monica's face remained calm. She had probably heard every version of the story, but her eyes softened. "I'm really sorry to hear that." "Thank you," Chris responded automatically. I got her. Well, she doesn't know that I know. Not yet. But I have proof. And I've decided to divorce her. I came to you to understand my options and to start the process as soon as possible." Monica nodded, folding her hands on the table. "Okay, let's start from the beginning, just so I have all the facts. How long have you and Kelly been married? Any children?" 10 years next month. No children. "And you both live here in Maple Creek, Colorado, right?" "Yes." "Do any of you own a business or have any particularly complex assets? Or is it mostly personal assets like a house, savings, retirement accounts, and the like?" Chris cleared his throat. "We have a home joint ownership. We have savings and checking accounts, several retirement accounts from our jobs, a joint credit card, 2 cars. No business. We both work. She does sales for a manufacturing company. I am a technician for a utility company. Understood. She jotted down some notes on a yellow legal pad. And you said you have evidence of treason. What evidence? He felt a flash of embarrassment, but forced himself to answer. Video. She recorded some of her encounters. I found them on her computer. I copied them. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. If necessary, I can show you a fragment or provide copies. But believe me, it is clear and clear. Monica carefully raised her hand. It's not necessary at this stage. I trust you. Having such evidence can be useful as leverage, although it doesn't have to be legally decisive, as I'll explain in a minute. She continued asking factual questions. During the conversation, Chris found comfort in her confident and methodical approach. This was normal for her, which helped frame it as a solvable problem rather than just an emotional mess. Having collected the facts, Monica sat down. Okay, so first of all, Colorado is a no-fault divorce state. This means that by law, we don't have to prove adultery or any specific wrongdoing to file for divorce, simply declaring that the marriage is irretrievably broken. The court generally does not consider marital misconduct, such as adultery, when dividing property or awarding alimony. Chris had expected this based on what he knew, but it still stung to have it confirmed the law didn't care that she had cheated. Therefore, she does not face any legal penalties for fraud. Not in terms of the divorce decision itself, Monica said carefully. However, that doesn't mean your evidence is worthless. It can put you in a strong negotiating position. People often want to avoid embarrassing revelations. If she's reasonable, she may agree to a fair division of assets and act quickly if confronted, especially if she knows you have evidence. The last thing she probably wants is for that evidence to be made public, say, if there was a trial or if you shared it with others. Chris nodded, catching her meaning. I'm not going to publicly humiliate her, although God knows part of me wants to. I just want this to end on fair terms. I see, and I'm not suggesting that we threaten her with more exposure than necessary. It's just that if you quietly let her know that you have this evidence, it might get her to cooperate. Right. Now, regarding the division of property, generally, Colorado expects an equitable division. 10 years is a significant length of time for a marriage, so most property acquired during the marriage is considered marital property. The house, savings, etc., are usually divided approximately 50-50 unless there is a good reason otherwise. The thought in Chris's mind was that Kelly would get half of everything, despite her betrayal. It didn't feel right, but he pulled himself together. Is there any scenario where I could keep the house, or would she get paid less? I don't want to reward her for that, to be honest. Monica half smiled sympathetically. I understand. Infidelity in itself is usually not a factor. However, if, for example, family funds were spent on her affair, for example, if she spent a lot of money from joint accounts on trips or gifts for this other person, we could make a case for an unequal division to compensate for this waste of family assets. Do you know if that happened? I'm not sure. Her trips were presumably work-related and most likely paid for by her company, or at least not directly by us. I didn't see any obvious large, unexplained expenses on our accounts, but maybe I haven't looked closely enough yet. We can look at statements on this. They may not be significant enough to worry about. Another point of view, if keeping the house is important to you, sometimes one spouse buys out the other's share, or you trade other assets. Chris thought about it. The house. It was a good house, but it was a lot house. To be honest, he wasn't sure he wanted it anymore, given all the memories that came with it. Honestly, I think I'd happily sell it and split the proceeds, or let her take it if she buys me out. After all this, I have no attachment to living there. This is understandable. Many people prefer to start over. We will be able to understand this with time. She flipped to a new page in her notebook. Now, spousal support. Are either of you significantly superior to the other in terms of earnings? Not much. I think we're pretty close. In a few years, she might make a little more in commissions. Last year, I made about $80,000, and she probably made $90,000. In this range, and with both of you working full-time, permanent alimony is unlikely. Perhaps temporary support if one of you needs time to adjust, but since neither of you is financially dependent on the other, it's probably not a big deal. Do you plan to ask her for any support, or are you concerned that she might ask you? He shook his head. I don't want anything from her, and I would be very angry if she tried to get anything from me after what she did. But I suppose she could ask to keep the house or something instead of support. We'll look into it if that's an issue. Given the lack of children and similar income, it should be a simple divorce once she agrees. The main potential stumbling block is emotional if she drags her feet or tries to argue something out of anger or denial. Chris sighed, running a hand through his hair. Kelly, she may react emotionally, but she's also very concerned about her image. I suspect she'll want to avoid the public spectacle. I might be wrong, but I think if I frame it as, I know, here's the proof, it's over, sign here, she'll eventually comply, if only to keep quiet and move on. Monica nodded understandingly. This is often the case. Many cheaters, when confronted with evidence, choose the path of least resistance, especially if they want to quickly move on with an affair partner or avoid consequences. We can hope so. But be prepared for some initial anxiety, tears, anger, attempts at reconciliation, or gaslighting. You should consider how you will handle this conversation. I planned this, Chris admitted. I'm not going to get into a debate with her. I just want to lay out what I know, give her the papers. Actually, I was thinking of doing it in a sort of controlled way to avoid blowing up face to face. He hesitated, then decided to explain. It's her birthday in a few weeks. I was planning on having the papers ready by then and leaving them for her as a surprise. Monica raised her eyebrows and a wry smile touched her lips. It's certainly dramatic. I've seen people do similar things, handing over documents for an anniversary or a birthday. It's emotionally charged, but if it gives you a sense of closure or poetic justice, and as long as it's served properly by law, that's up to you. I don't necessarily want to hurt her, even though she hurt me. But I admit the symbolism is attractive, Chris said quietly. It basically ensures that I never forget that date for another reason, and I can get through the next weeks focused on that endpoint. Monica nodded. Okay, we can, of course, time the filing to coincide with the date you choose. Just know that once you file in Colorado, there is usually a 90-day waiting period before the divorce can be finalized. But you can serve her the papers as soon as they are filed or ready. 90 days, Chris repeated. He was amazed that even after he dropped the bomb, everything would not end immediately. There are at least 3 more months of legal uncertainty, but there's nothing you can do about it. I will begin preparing the petition and initial divorce papers. I will also prepare a draft of the proposed property settlement that could potentially be presented to her. If she is willing to sign the agreement, it could bypass a lot of controversy. Monica opened the calendar. What is her birthday date so I can write down the schedule? October 3rd, he replied. Monica made a note. We can aim to get everything ready a few days in advance. Now, from a logistics standpoint, if you're planning on moving out or getting her to move out, we have to consider that too. Who's going to be living in the house during the process, etc. A lot of people continue to cohabitate until things are sorted out, but that can be stressful. I'm working on leaving, Chris said. I actually started looking for an apartment. I didn't tell her, of course. I'll probably move my things gradually. Ideally, by the time I take care of it, I'll already have a new place and everything I need, so I won't have to stay under the same roof. That may be reasonable. Just be careful not to take household items that might cause her to throw a tantrum, at least not permanently until it's agreed upon. Taking personal items is okay. I see. At first, I planned to take only my personal items and leave the public items for later. He thought about furniture, kitchen utensils. Their separation would happen eventually, but for the most part, he didn't care. They spent the next half hour discussing a few more details. Monica collected the information needed for the forms, such as full names, dates of birth, date and place of marriage, and so on. She explained the fee structure for her services, and he paid the fee using a credit card. It was a tidy sum, but he didn't even blink it was worth every penny. Finally, Monica repeated the plan. Okay, Chris, I'll get the papers ready for filing. Do you want me to actually file them with the court before you give them to her, or just get them ready so you can hand them over and then file them right after? He thought about it. I was thinking about filing the lawsuit the same day or the day before so it would be official. But maybe it's better to file it after she knows so she doesn't end up in court before I tell her. If you're timing it as a surprise for her birthday, we could submit the application in the morning and the process server will personally hand the official notice to her. Or you can give her the paperwork in person, then I'll file it the next day. The difference is mostly procedural. Some people prefer the dramatic you've been served effect, others do it more informally. I think I'll give them to her myself, along with the evidence, like I said. Keep this between us. Then we'll sign the papers right away. Okay? Just be sure to give her the documents that same day. We could also prepare a short letter from our firm for the escort, stating that she should direct any questions or answers to me and not to you to keep things polite. Sounds good, Chris agreed. He could imagine that otherwise she might blow up his phone. Monica smiled encouragingly as they stood up to end the meeting. It's going to be a tough few weeks, but from everything you've said, you're handling it great. Just remember to take care of yourself. Do you have support, friends, or a therapist to talk to? I have a good friend, Joe, who was a tough guy, and, well, maybe I'll find a therapist later, but for now I'm coping, he replied. That's good. It's normal to go through a roller coaster of emotions, even if you're the one making the decision to end it. So be kind to yourself. Chris nodded. Thanks, I'll try. She walked him to the door and shook his hand again. I will contact you as soon as the draft documents are ready for your review. Probably early next week at the latest. You can call or email at any time if anything comes up or you have questions. He felt a slight lift in weight. Having someone as competent as her in his corner made all the difference. Thank you, Monica, really. Walking out of the office, Chris took a deep breath. He didn't even realize he was holding. It was a little after 10 in the morning. He stood on the sidewalk, watching cars drive by on Main Street and people going about their business as if everything was fine. For them, it was like that. Nothing was normal for him, but at least now he had a sense of direction, a frame. He pulled out his phone and quickly sent Joe a message. The meeting is over. The lawyer is doing this. I'll tell you later. Almost immediately, Joe replied, Fine. How do you feel? Chris typed back, relieved to have a plan. Still worrying. I take the rest of the day to deal with a few things. Joe, I'm here if you need anything. Proud of you, dude. Chris managed a small smile. Thank you. I'm fine. We'll talk later. He put the phone in his pocket and headed to his car. Next on his list, he wanted to secure a new place to live. If he could find an apartment today or within a week, that would be another piece of the puzzle. As he started the engine, his mind wandered for a moment to the surreal nature of it all. Here he planned to share a life lawyer, apartment, secret preparations, while at home Kelly probably assumed everything was fine, planned dinners and work trips, and perhaps even thought about their upcoming anniversary. The thought made a muscle twitch in his jaw. No more, he told himself. That life, that forgetful and trusting husband is gone. By Monday evening, Chris had an appointment to view a studio apartment on the other side of town. He figured the apartment would be fine as a temporary base for at least a year until the dust settled. The place he found was a small complex called Pine Grove Apartments, nothing fancy, but clean and private enough. The leasing agent, a cheerful young woman named Dana, showed him around the apartment. It felt strange to be doing something as mundane as looking for an apartment on a day like this. While Dana chatted about the laundry and the parking space, Chris nodded automatically. The apartment itself was modest: a living room with beige carpet, a tiny kitchen with dated linoleum, a decent bedroom, and a view of the parking lot. It wasn't comfortable here yet, but he could imagine himself here simply because he needed to imagine himself here, where that it wasn't the same house with Kelly. "So, what do you think?" Dana asked, smiling expectantly as they stood in the empty living room. "This apartment is available immediately. We also have a move-in special this month, half your first month's rent." Chris cleared his throat. "It's, okay. I mean, it suits my needs." He tried to put on a polite smile. "I'll need to move pretty soon. Are there any problems moving quickly, like this week or next week at the latest?" Dana beamed. "Not at all. We can apply and do background checks today, and if all goes well, you can get the keys tomorrow or Wednesday." "Great," he said with a curt nod. His reputation and past must be in order. At least he had nothing to hide in this kingdom. "Let's do this." As he filled out the rental application paperwork in the complex's small office, he used only his personal cell phone and email for communication. As for the current address, he simply stated the address of the house, but did not mention that it was a family address. He did not ask for a spouse. Paying the deposit and the first month, he decided to use a check from his personal account, which he ensured was funded by transferring some money earlier that morning. Before arriving at the apartment, Chris stopped by the Maple Creek Credit Union. The visit seemed secret. He withdrew several $1,000s in cash and also quietly opened a new savings account exclusively in his name, where he transferred part of the money from the general account. He kept the amount modest enough that it wouldn't cause immediate alarm if Kelly looked at the balance. A $10,000 withdrawal might be noticeable, but he doubted she tracked it on a daily basis. This money will go toward the initial rent, legal fees, and give him a cushion if things get frozen later. The bank teller, Miss Huang, commented, "Planning a vacation, Mr. Danvers?" when he took the money, and he just gave an evasive answer. Another small part of his old life-friendly banter at the bank turned into something awkward because of the secret he was keeping. Now that Dana was checking his credit, Chris's mind was wandering. He realized that lunchtime was approaching. Usually at this time on Monday, he was at work, eating a sandwich at his desk or chatting with colleagues in the break room. He wondered what rumors might start if he took more days off or seemed distracted. So far, only his immediate superior knew that he was having a personal day. Dana returned with a smile and a set of papers. "Everything is fine. Authorship and biography are clear. We just need your signature here, here, and here." He signed where indicated, officially signing the lease. It struck him that this was the first important step toward physically separating his life from Kelly's. A new address, a place where she won't be. It was both inspiring and sad. "Here are your copies of the lease, and I'll need the security deposit and the first month's rent. You can write a check, or we can run a card." He pulled out his checkbook and wrote out a check. Dana tore off the check with a flourish. "Okay, welcome to Pine Grove. Let's see. We can get the apartment ready for Wednesday. Would you like to pick up the keys on Wednesday morning?" Wednesday afternoon would be better, if possible. Say, around 5. He recalled that Kelly would be in Denver late on Wednesday, so it would be ideal to reschedule some things then. "Of course, meet me at the office on Wednesday at 5 with the keys." She shook his hand, her grip firm, her enthusiasm undimmed by his subdued response. "Good luck with your move, Mr. Danvers." "Thank you," he replied. Using the official address stung a bit. The last time he did something like this was when Mr. and Mrs. Danvers rented a storage unit together while renovating their house. Now he was a lonely Mr. Danvers, starting over. Chris felt a mixture of relief and heaviness as he left the Pine Grove apartments. He found a refuge, a place to escape to. In 2 days, he will be able to start moving. This gave him the opportunity today and tomorrow to discreetly sort and pack what he wanted to take. On the way home, he realized that it was already noon. He decided to stop by work briefly to check on a few things, partly to distract himself and partly to maintain a semblance of normalcy. By now, the shock of the weekend had turned into constant pain, but focusing on tasks could sometimes dull it. He parked at the utility company's headquarters and entered his department through a side door. Several colleagues were surprised to see him. "Hey, Chris, did you think you weren't home today?" called Mark, another technician, as they passed in the hall. "I just needed to take care of something this morning," Chris explained with a half smile. "I think I'll go in and read some letters." Mark nodded, uninterested. "Cool. We had a meeting, but nothing serious. Are you okay? You look a little beat up." "I didn't sleep well," Chris lied, shrugging. "Maybe something is wrong." "Ah, take care, man. It's freezing cold out there." In his small office cubicle, Chris spent an hour going through everything, answering client emails, reviewing project schedules. The routine felt surreal, as if his body was on autopilot while his mind raced to more important issues. He saw a note on the monitor from his boss about an upcoming training session next week. A date caught his attention: next Tuesday, October 3rd, Kelly's birthday. He asked for a day off a few months ago to plan something special. With dark irony, he realized that he would still be filming it, but for a completely different reason. He'll have to tell his boss that it was for personal reasons and not a fun birthday outing. As he turned off his computer, his phone vibrated with a message. It was from Ashley Reed, a name he hadn't seen in a long time. About a year ago, Ashley was working as a co-worker at a utility company. They worked closely on a network management software update project. She went to work in the city, but they remained friendly, occasionally exchanging messages or holiday cards. He opened the message. "Hey, stranger. I'm in Maple Creek for a few days for work. Any chance you could grab some coffee and chat? A lot of time has passed." "Is Ashley in town?" The timing was unexpected. He hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure he was ready to communicate or explain himself. But Ashley didn't know anything. She was just talking to an old friend. And perhaps a friendly face and casual conversation about something other than the crisis will do him some good. He replied, "Ashley, a lot of time. Yes, I could have some coffee. How about tomorrow afternoon? Let's say 5. I'll be leaving work by then." She answered almost immediately, "Ideal. How about a grounded cafe in the city center?" "See you there," he confirmed. He put the phone aside, realizing that he would not have work tomorrow due to training. But at 17 o'clock, it was still normal. As he left the office, he felt a tiny spark of something positive. Ashley has always been easy to talk to. She's smart, down to earth, and has a good sense of humor. When they worked together, they would often have lunch or drinks after work, just as friends. Kelly knew her superficially and had met her at a couple of office parties without any problems. There was nothing wrong with this. In fact, Ashley was engaged to someone at the time. He wondered if he should tell Ashley what was going on. Probably not in detail. He was not ready to broadcast it. Maybe he'll just stick to lighter topics. Still, he suspected that she might realize that something was wrong with him. She was always distinguished by insight. Tuesday came and went almost in a blur. Chris spent most of the day at work, trying to concentrate. Kelly went to her office, and then, around noon, left for a day trip to Denver, giving him the evening free. Since she was out late, he and Joe took the opportunity to temporarily move several boxes of his personal books, tools, and off-season clothing into Joe's garage. He didn't want to bring them to the new apartment just yet. He carefully left the most necessary and frequently used items in the house so as not to arouse suspicion. Enough clothes in the closet, toiletries in place, etc. His packing was selective and neat. Everything she probably wouldn't notice was missing until much later. He packed. It's amazing how much of your life can be hidden away in secrecy if you're careful. A few books from the back shelf, some old hobby equipment from the rafters of the garage, personal mementos like his high school yearbooks, which he doubted Kelly had ever looked at. By Wednesday at work, the fatigue set in again. But Wednesday also meant apartment key day. He could hardly believe that by evening he would have his own separate space. Around 4:30, he left the office and drove to the grounded cafe to meet Ashley as planned before heading out to get his keys. The cafe was a cozy little place with brick walls and local art on display. Upon entering, he immediately noticed Ashley at the corner table, stirring a cup of tea. She looked up and broke into a smile. Chris, she stood up to hug him. Ashley has always loved to cuddle. He returned the hug, surprised at how comforting a simple friendly hug was after Kelly's cold and intense hugs of late. They sat down. "Good to see you," he said, and he meant it. Ashley hasn't changed much. She's in her early 40s, like him, with a few laugh lines and brown hair cut into a stylish bob. She wore a navy blue jacket and blouse and looked professional. "How's life? Still loving your new job?" She talked about her life. The new job was good, although stressful, and she was considering moving back to Maple Creek because she could mostly work remotely. She asked about mutual former colleagues, and he told her office gossip that she had missed. It was a relief to talk about normal things. They remembered a little about a funny incident that had happened during training many years ago, and Chris even laughed, a genuine laugh that he hadn't felt in weeks. After a while, Ashley tilted her head, studying him with her sharp green eyes. "Okay, enough small talk. How are you doing, Chris? You look. I don't know, I'm a little depressed. Everything is fine." The concern in her voice was genuine. Chris was tempted to unload, but resisted. "I've had a rough couple of days," he admitted. "There's some personal stuff going on. I can't go into detail right now, but it's hard." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand lightly. "I'm so sorry. Just know that I'm here as a friend if you ever want to talk, now or later." Her kindness almost destroyed him. He swallowed, then nodded. "Thank you. It means a lot." She leaned back, sipping her tea. "Is this Kelly? Are you guys okay?" Hearing Kelly's name made him look down at his coffee, feeling his throat tighten. He settled on the version of the truth. "Honestly, no. We're not okay, but I'm working on it." "I'm really sorry," she said quietly. "I remember how highly you always spoke of her. If there is anything I can do, even just listen, say the word." "You've already helped," Chris smiled sadly. "It's a nice break from what's running through my head 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." Ashley responded with a sympathetic smile. "Then let's talk about something completely frivolous. Have you ever started that old Mustang?" He chuckled. She was referring to the ancient project machine he was tinkering with in his garage. "Oh, that thing. Actually, I did it. Now it purrs like a kitten, though it took me years." Her eyes lit up. "No kidding? You should show me sometime. I remember you were up to your elbows in engine parts for months." They chatted a little more, moving the conversation to convenient topics. All this time, Chris felt warm. There was someone here who knew him as more than just Kelly's husband, someone who took care of him. It reminded him that there was a world outside the nightmare at home. After about 40 minutes, he realized that he needed to pick up the keys to the apartment. "I hate to interrupt this, but I have an errand I can't miss," he said apologetically. "Don't worry," Ashley said. "I'm just glad we were able to catch up, and I'll be around for a few more days if you want to hang out again or need anything. Maybe we can have dinner later in the week. I'll let you know," he suggested, not quite sure if he was ready for it in the midst of all this, but found himself really wanting to see her again. "Please do it." She stood up and hugged him again. Pulling away, she looked into his eyes. "No matter what you go through, just remember that you are a strong guy and you have people who care about you. You will get through this, okay?" Those simple words almost made him lose his self-control. He sighed. "Thank you, Ash. I really appreciate it." They parted ways, and as Chris walked to his car, he felt inspired by this meeting. She represented a part of his life untouched by Kelly or the betrayal, a part he could lean on more in the future. He checked the time. Almost 5:30. He was a little late to meet the apartment manager and hand over the keys. Luckily, Pine Grove was only a few minutes away. He found Dana still in the leasing office, waiting with a set of keys and a welcome bag. With keys in hand, Chris walked into his new apartment and turned on the lights as dusk fell outside. The space was quiet, empty, and completely his. He put down the welcome folder and walked slowly through the living room and into the bedroom. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint or cleaning products. It was strange, a little lonely, but liberating at the same time. Finally, October 3rd arrived, a clear, crisp Tuesday, Kelly's birthday, and a day that Chris had been preparing for weeks with care and growing determination. He woke up early to his nearly empty family home. The past week has been a delicate dance of feigned normality. If Kelly noticed the growing emptiness in the closets or the missing boxes in the garage, she didn't say anything. Perhaps she was too busy with her secret world to notice the changes in his. Perhaps she assumed he was doing fall cleaning or putting things away for the winter. In any case, she still didn't suspect anything. The alarm clock showed 6:30 a.m. when he quietly slipped out of bed. Kelly stirred slightly, but did not wake up. He stood for a moment in the dim light of dawn filtering through the curtains, looking at her sleeping figure. Her face was peaceful, almost childlike in sleep. For a fleeting second, the pain of old love and affection flared up, intertwined with pain. This was the woman he had once thought he would grow old with. He reminded himself of the video, of the lies. Pain turned into determination. There was no room for doubt. He had already placed a small stack of things on the dresser, an envelope containing the divorce papers that Monica had finalized yesterday, another envelope containing a USB drive containing copies of videos of Kelly's affairs, and a small black ring box that held his engagement ring. He thought about how exactly to present them, and in the end decided that the best way was to keep it simple. The divorce papers themselves included a cover letter from Monica addressed to Kelly, explaining that Chris had hired her and advising Kelly to seek advice. Standard stuff, but important. He carefully placed the envelopes and the ring box in the center of the bed, on top of the neatly smoothed blanket on Kelly's side. In the early light, they looked stern and sinister. Last night, before going to bed, Kelly excitedly mentioned that she was taking the day off from work because it was her birthday. "Maybe we should go have lunch," she suggested. Chris agreed with a convincing smile, knowing what he would actually be doing during lunch. Now he wrote a small note on the birthday card he bought for the show, a regular happy birthday card that he didn't even sign with love, just his name. He placed it next to the ring box. Let her think that this was all her surprise at first glance. His heart pounded in his chest as he double-checked everything. He then quietly gathered the last of his belongings, a bag in which he had packed toiletries and a couple of changes of clothes, his laptop, and a few personal items that he had not yet moved. He carried them into his car over 2 trips, trying not to make any noise. The sun was barely rising, and the area was quiet. By 7:15 a.m. he was ready to go. Kelly was still sleeping. She most likely won't get up until 8 on her day off. Chris stood in the bedroom doorway for the last time. He felt strangely calm. The hardest part was those weeks of waiting and pretending. Now that the action was near, a cold confidence strengthened him. He took out his phone, placed it on the dresser, and pressed the record button. In a quiet voice, he delivered a prepared message that he had rehearsed in his mind 100 times, but he still needed several takes to deliver it without his voice shaking too much. In the video, he wished her a happy birthday in what could pass for a normal tone, and then quietly continued, "I'm sorry I can't be with you today to celebrate, but I have a surprise for you, Kelly. It's in our bedroom. By the time you see this, I'll be gone, along with a lot of other things." He paused, looking at the camera, trying to keep his face calm and firm. At this point in the recording, he swallowed hard, pain creeping through him, despite the practiced lines. "Happy birthday, Kelly. Take care." And then he finished the video. Now standing there in real time, he took one last look at the woman in the bed. "Goodbye, Kelly," he whispered, barely audible. Then he turned and walked out, carefully closing the bedroom door behind him. In the kitchen, he left an envelope with a birthday card on the table so she could easily see it when she came looking for him. A kind of bait to make her curious and bring her into the bedroom. He stepped outside into the morning cool. his breath visible in the autumn air. The world seemed strangely new and raw. The leaves on the branches began to turn gold and red. As he got into the car, he looked at the house. So many memories within these walls, and soon he might have to discuss selling it. But that was later. Chris drove away, clutching the steering wheel tightly. Instead of going to his office or any familiar place, he drove to a quiet park on the outskirts of town, where he could be alone to watch the video and prepare for any storm that would follow. At 8:30 am, as the sun rose higher in the clear blue sky, he tapped his phone screen and pressed send on a video message, addressing it to Kelly's phone and email just to be sure she would receive it. He only wrote, "Play this without me. Happy birthday." There was no turning back now. Then he began to wait. He could almost imagine her sleepy smile turning into a puzzled look as she walked into the bedroom in search of a gift. She will find the ring, the papers, the evidence. The image of her shock brought him no joy, only grim confirmation. His phone started buzzing frantically around 9 am. The first call came from Kelly. He saw the phone vibrate on the bench next to him and didn't answer. It fell silent, then buzzed again another call. Then came a flood of text messages, a barrage, "Chris, what is this?" and "Where are you? Please, we need to talk." And then, "Oh my God, please answer me." They alternated between disbelief, apology, and panic, the tone changing with each new message. He read each of them as they appeared, but did not answer. His resolve wavered only slightly when she started sending voicemails with the sound of her crying, begging him to at least talk to her. He forced himself to turn off notifications. He told her not to contact him, and he meant it. At least until she could do it rationally, and even then he preferred it through lawyers. The part of him that still cared didn't want to hear her suffer, it was too painful. And the part of him that was angry didn't want to hear excuses or excuses. At 9:30 am, a missed call appeared on his phone from a number he recognized as her mother's and another from a mutual friend. Obviously, Kelly began reaching out to others in desperation. He groaned. He didn't want to involve others in this today. He sent this mutual friend a short message, something general. "I'm safe. I know what Kelly did. Please understand I need space. I'll explain when I'm ready." The friend, apparently shocked himself, responded with a simple, "Okay, here if you need anything." Kelly's mother also left a voicemail, her voice gentle and concerned. "Chris, dear, Kelly called us hysterical. Please, can you call her? Or at least let us know you're okay. I don't know what happened between you two, but that's not like you. We care about both of you." Around 10 o'clock, another message came from Kelly. "I'm really sorry. Please, let's talk. We can fix this. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. Please, Chris, I beg you." He closed his eyes and leaned back on the park bench. Her despair was palpable even through the text. It was the first open admission that she knew what she was doing, no denial or anger, just remorse and fear. She knew she had blown up her world. Reading this, he felt strangely calm. This once again confirmed that he did the right thing. If he had directly confronted her a few weeks ago, perhaps she would have cried and apologized then too, but who knows what kind of manipulation or second chance might have followed. Now everything was clear. The divorce was in full swing. The power was completely in his hands. For a moment, he considered sending a short reply to acknowledge her apology, but hold firm. And yet he changed his mind. She could take any answer as a revelation. The silence was more determined. Instead, he wrote to Monica, his lawyer, "It's done. She saw the papers. Expect her to reach out." Monica replied that she could handle any communication and advised him to lie low. She also noted that she would submit documents to the court by the end of the day. His chest ached, a mixture of relief, sadness, and exhaustion. The deed was done, but the emotional consequences were just beginning for her, of course, and for him too. Chris stood up and decided to go to his new apartment. He needed the comfort of these empty walls, a place where he could collapse and maybe finally fall asleep. He also winced when he realized that he hadn't eaten anything all morning. Before setting off, He stopped at a drive-through and ate a sandwich and coffee for breakfast. It tasted like cardboard, but it was fuel. When he arrived at his Pine Grove apartment, laden with a bag and laptop, he nearly ran into one of his new neighbors in the hallway, a middle-aged man walking a small terrier dog. The neighbor smiled politely. "Are we moving?"
Yeah.
Chris managed to answer. "Welcome," the man said warmly. "I'm Ed from 3B. If you need anything, just call." "Thanks, Ed, I'm Chris," he said. It was a casual, friendly conversation that, under any other circumstances, would have been unremarkable. But today it seemed surreal. He met his neighbor as a man starting over, not as a husband in that beautiful house on Maple Street. In his apartment, he set his things down and sat down on the only piece of furniture he had, the folding chair he had brought earlier. Silence. No messages from Kelly in the last half hour. Perhaps she had finally listened to his plea for distance, or perhaps she was too emotionally drained. He imagined her, probably still in shock. Maybe her parents were on their way to console her, or she was calling her lover. Chris rubbed his face with his hands. It seemed to him that he might suddenly burst into tears, but there were no tears. Instead, there was numbness. "It's over," he told himself. "This is truly the end." And despite the intense grief, there was also an undeniable feeling of relief, like taking off a shoe that had been quietly pinching for miles. He survived the worst morning of his life with his dignity intact, and his future his only spread out before him. He picked up his phone again and saw another message from Kelly that had arrived a few minutes ago while he was driving. "I won't come to you because you asked me not to. But please, someday we can just talk, just once. I have to tell you, I'm so sorry, Chris. I hate myself. Please take care of yourself." He read it twice, and then, taking a deep breath, turned off the phone completely. Perhaps one day he would talk to her, when the wound wasn't so raw. Perhaps not, but not today for sure. Today was the first day of his new life, as they say, and he'll be damned if he doesn't make the most of it. 3 months later, on a cold January morning, Chris stood on the balcony of his apartment, a cup of hot coffee warming his hands. The breath of winter painted the edges of the sky in pale tones, and its breath came out in small clouds. He found the cold invigorating rather than depressing. It made him feel alive, present in the moment. It's been a little over 90 days since he sent that fateful birthday video and moved on from his old life. Meanwhile, the legal wheels kept turning. The mandatory waiting period in Colorado expired last week, and without any objection from Kelly, the divorce was finalized yesterday with a judge's signature. That's how a 10-year marriage ended on paper. There was surprisingly little drama in the trial. Kelly, through her lawyer, agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds, and they effortlessly divided their bank accounts and assets. True to her initial apology, she seemed determined not to confront him about anything, probably out of guilt and perhaps out of shame. Since the birthday news broke, they have seen each other only once, at a brief mediation meeting necessary to settle the divorce 2 months ago. Chris remembered walking into the conference room with Monica and seeing Kelly sitting there, small and haggard, her eyes puffy, as if she had been crying for weeks. For the first 10 minutes, she couldn't meet his gaze. When she finally did, her voice shook as she said, "I'm so sorry," in person, her voice barely louder than a whisper. He just nodded and remained silent. There was nothing more to say. The agreements were signed, and they went away without any outbursts. It was painfully civil. Now, as he sipped his coffee, Chris felt a sense of deep peace mixed with residual sadness. He wouldn't lie to himself. These months had been hard. Nights when he woke up from nightmares of betrayal, moments when he doubted himself or felt a crushing loneliness in his new apartment. But every day I felt a little better. The support of friends helped a lot. Joe remained with us constantly, his cheerful encouragement and occasional drinking buddy. They got into the habit of watching football every Sunday at Chris's house or sports bar, a ritual that gave Chris something to look forward to and reminded him that he was not alone. This morning, Joe was soon to come over with a breakfast burrito to celebrate Official Freedom Day, as he called it. Ashley also became a good friend in this new chapter. After a cup of coffee, she began to visit him often. In December, she officially returned to Maple Creek. Their friendship grew as they spent more time together, sometimes having dinner, sometimes just talking on the phone. Now she knew about the divorce. Eventually, once the initial dust had settled, he eventually opened up and told her the rough outline. She was just supportive and kind, always quick to remind him of his value and crack jokes to make him smile. He deeply appreciated her presence. He didn't know if it would ever turn into something more. Neither of them were in a hurry or labeling it. It was just nice to feel a warm connection that happened naturally, without pressure. For now, that was enough. Chris looked at the city skyline in the distance, the sun now reflecting off several windows. He felt good. More than good, he was optimistic. The burden was lifted the day he chose himself over a fictitious marriage. He rediscovered hobbies he had neglected. The Mustang that Joe had in his garage was now completely restored, and he drove it on the open road on weekends, which he found had a laxative effect. He started going to the gym with Joe twice a week, channeling stress into exercise and gaining confidence in both body and mind. Even his work has improved. He has regained his concentration and recently completed a challenging project that earned him praise from his boss. Some time after the breakup, he admitted to his immediate superior that he was going through a personal crisis. The manager was understanding and even recommended a consultant. Chris went to several sessions that helped him deal with his anger in a healthy way. In short, life went on, and so did he. He heard the sound of a key in the lock his own door. Only one person had a spare key. The door swung open, and Big Joe walked in with a takeout bag that smelled like eggs and salsa. "Knock, knock," Joe shouted with a grin. "It's the breakfast fairy." Chris chuckled and stepped back inside, the warm air of his apartment hugging him. "You're early. I was just enjoying the view." "The early bird gets the burrito," Joe joked, handing him one of the foil-wrapped beauties. "And coffee, but it looks like you already took care of that." They sat down at Chris's small dining table, a new purchase he had made for himself, symbolically choosing one that only seated 4 people instead of the old, hefty 6-seater table they had at home. It suited his simple life better. Joe raised the foil-wrapped burrito like toast. "For your freedom, officially. How are you feeling, man?" Chris thought about it. A smile slowly appeared on his face and reached his eyes. "Honestly, I feel good." Joe nodded with satisfaction. "Damn right you should. You survived the worst and came out the other side. I'm proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without my friends," Chris answered sincerely. "Especially to you. I owe it to you." "No," Joe waved it off, although he looked touched. "That's what brothers are for." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.